In the late 2000s and early 2010s, the film industry was obsessed with found footage movies. The horror genre carried the majority of this movement, with movies like VHS, Cloverfield, and of course the Paranormal Activity franchise. Now, as the 2010s progressed, the found footage gimmicks started entering new genres. We saw comedies like Project X, and even disaster movies like Into the Storm. And that brings us to the movie we're revisiting today, a high school drama / superhero origin story, or supervillain origin story in Chronicle. This movie follows 3 high school boys who stumble across a mysterious substance and gain telekinetic powers. Chronicle not only took advantage of the booming found footage genre, it also capitalized on the teen drama and superhero genres before they were oversaturated. It's like this perfect blend of genres that hit at the right time for a high school kid like myself back in 2012. So does it hold up after all these years later? Let's talk about it. The movie opens up with a very bleak scene that sets the tone for the movie. Dane DeHaan's character, Andrew, is arguing with his abusive father through the door before going to school. Andrew tells him he's got a camera and he's going to film everything from now on. He gets a ride to school from his cousin Matt, played by Alex Russell. And they seem to have a good relationship in the car, but when they get to school, it seems like Matt is embarrassed to be seen with his cousin Andrew. So we follow Andrew for the rest of the day and get a peek into his life. And this boy's life is rough. We see him eating lunch alone. He gets bullied at school. He gets bullied on the way home. He gets bullied by his dad when he gets home. You see all these bad things happen to him and you just want him to fight back. Later on, Matt convinces Andrew to go with him to this huge party in the woods. But when they get there, Matt ditches him and tells him to do his own thing. So we've seen Matt do this twice now. He shows that he cares about his cousin, but he's too concerned with his popularity and what others will think about him if he's seen with Andrew, instead of being there for his cousin. During the party, Andrew gets picked on again, so he steps outside, and this is when we get introduced to Steve, played by Michael B. Jordan. Steve notices Andrew is crying and that he's alone, and he comforts him before telling Andrew he's been looking for him, that he's a friend of Matt's, and he wants him to follow him to record something.
What thing? You'll see.
The 3 boys find a hole in the middle of the woods that's making this strange sound, and for some reason they think it's a good idea to go in it and explore. Which is a good thing, because otherwise we wouldn't have a movie. While they're down there, the camera starts acting up, but we get glimpses of this crystal-like structure, and it looks like it may be alive, like it may be alien or something, but we never get answers to what it is or how it got there. But I kind of like that. It adds to the mystery and makes it feel like even though they have these fun powers, that something bad is actually happening to them instead of something good. The next scene, we get hit with a time skip that seems to be a couple weeks. The boys are throwing a baseball at each other, and it's revealed they've gained telekinetic powers and can control objects with their minds. And the next chunk of the movie shows how cool it would actually be to have these powers, especially with a group of friends. We see them building Legos and pulling pranks on each other, pulling pranks on other people.
Just looking at it. What you looking at, girl? Stay in school.
They learn how to fly and they play football in the clouds. The boys are bonding and hanging out all the time. And Andrew finally has a group of friends. But this movie does something that I appreciated on this rewatch. Every time things are looking up for Andrew, life just knocks him back down. We get to see more of his life at home and find out his mom is sick and they can't afford her medication. His dad used to be a fighter. His dad used to be a fighter. His dad used to be a firefighter, but now he's just a drunk. He disappears. And when he is around, he's verbally and sometimes physically abusing Andrew. So while Andrew is out and having a great time with his friends, there's still this underlying anger inside of him. After a day of testing out their powers and pulling pranks on people, Andrew takes it way too far and knocks a driver off the road and almost kills him. Matt and Steve are upset with him and have to decide right then and there that they need to have rules, and they have to be responsible with their new powers. Later in the movie, Steve comes up with a plan to make Andrew cool by using his powers in a school talent show. They put together this whole magic act, and the plan actually works. Everybody in the audience loved it, so to celebrate, they go to a party afterwards, and he's the man of the hour. But as I mentioned earlier, when things are looking up for Andrew, life knocks him back down. So Andrew disappears upstairs with the girl that he's hooking up with. But when we catch up with him, he got a little too drunk and throws up all over himself, all over the girl he was hooking up with. And Steve's trying to lighten the mood. He's trying to console him, telling him everything's going to be all right. But Andrew snaps back at him and kicks him out of the room. In a later scene, Andrew's dad confronts him about his expensive camera, claiming Andrew's spending all of his money and having fun while his mom suffers at home. He says he looked through the footage and claims the guys aren't really his friends, and he's still a loser. He's really not making any sense and is just trying to find a reason to belittle his son. He's a bully. So Andrew calls him out on his lies and calls him an idiot. So of course he doesn't take that well. His dad tries to beat him up again, but this time Andrew uses his powers to overpower his dad, screaming, "I can crush you." And from this point on, Andrew starts to spiral a little bit out of control. We catch up with him later that night, and he's in the middle of the sky during a lightning storm. Then Steve shows up out of nowhere to check up on him. Andrew is begging him to leave him alone, but Steve insists on helping. Then out of anger, Andrew just snaps and accidentally kills Steve by throwing lightning at him, or somehow he causes the lightning to hit Steve and he kills him. We jump ahead of Steve's funeral and Matt confronts Andrew about what happened, but he refuses to talk to him about it and he just flies away. I should also mention that the reason Steve was able to find Andrew in the middle of nowhere is because Steve says that he heard him. So somehow through their powers, just, I don't know, telepathically they can hear each other. Or they're starting to hear each other. So this is never addressed, but I'm wondering if Matt also heard something and that's how he knows that Andrew was involved in Steve's death somehow. So now Andrew is practicing his powers on his own and claims he's an apex predator and shouldn't feel bad about harming anything weaker than him. So he's just completely lost it now.
You do not feel guilty when you squash a fly. And I think that means something.
The next scene, he goes to school and he rips the teeth out of the bully's mouth that was picking on him earlier in the movie. And he does it in front of everybody, and it's never really addressed. Like, they all saw him do it. But everything kind of goes to shit after this day anyway, so moving on. He later decides to rob the local bullies to pay for his mom's medicine and seems to kill all of them. That's also not confirmed, but there's blood on the floor. At the very least, these dudes have CTE for the rest of their lives. And when that's not enough money, he tries to rob a gas station later that night. But things go horribly wrong when it blows up, leaving him unconscious. So now he's at the hospital and there's police officers at the door. His dad comes to see him and reveals that his mom actually passed away while he was out looking for him the night before. And props to this actor because he's a real piece of shit. And this guy did a good job of portraying that. So his dad's screaming at him and is about to punch his unconscious son in the face, but Andrew wakes up and catches his hand and blows up the room. Now let's put a pause there. And let's jump over to Matt for a second. So Matt has his own B-plot throughout the movie. I mentioned earlier that he was ashamed to be friends with Andrew, but after they got their powers, he started hanging out with him more. He realizes that he's been wrong and mistreated people in his life by trying to chase popularity. Not just Andrew, but his ex-girlfriend who he gets back together with. That plotline really isn't developed well, and he sort of just decides to be a better person one day. But it's kind of hard to develop his story in a found footage movie that follows Andrew for the most part. So while Andrew is dealing with his dad at the hospital, we jump over to Matt, and he's hanging out with his girlfriend, and his nose starts to bleed really bad. He says that he can hear Andrew and that Andrew's in trouble. They drive to the hospital and Matt gets there just in time to save Andrew's dad from falling to his death. And now Andrew is wreaking havoc in the city and Matt is trying to stop him. The boys fight throughout the city and we see this from different cameras like cell phones, like the police car cameras, stoplights, I think even the bank or a store or something like that. They have to get really creative to show us this superhero fight with the constraints of the found footage gimmick. And I think they do a pretty good job of that. The fight ends when Matt has to make the difficult choice of killing Andrew to save the lives of the innocent people around them. He then flies off, and the next time we see him, he's in Tibet. Early in the movie, the boys plan to fly around the world together, and the one spot that Andrew wanted to go to was Tibet. He leaves the camera there, and that's the end of the movie. So does this movie hold up? I think this movie does a great job of making the audience empathize with Andrew. He was a victim of abuse at school and in his own home. He lived in fear every day of his life, so when he got just a little bit of power, he abused it and became a villain. Dane DeHaan and Michael B. Jordan are the standouts here. Dane DeHaan does a great job of looking defeated and scared, but when the turn happens and it's time to be angry, he nails that performance. Michael B. Jordan in this movie as Steve is just purely good. He makes you want to be his friend, and he truly wanted to be Andrew's friend and cared about him. I think that's what makes his death hit that much harder. This movie gets very creative with how they can move the camera using their powers, and it really helps step up the cinematography, which I remember being a breath of fresh air for the found footage genre at the time. Now I was really worried going back into this movie. I was thinking it wouldn't hold up since it's such a product of its time. But I think it still works as a villain origin story as you see this boy get corrupted by the world around him. But the real villain of this movie is this guy right here. I hate this man. I really focused on all the dark elements in this movie, but one thing I forgot to mention is that this movie's actually pretty funny. Like, it is fun seeing these boys bond through this unique experience. Seeing the boys use their powers and open up to each other makes it hurt that much more at the end. And I went back negative. Now, of the three boys, Michael B. Jordan is clearly the standout superstar here, but I'm actually surprised Dane DeHaan didn't become this giant superstar. But it's not from a lack of trying. We've seen him in the Spider-Man franchise, but that movie wasn't that good. We've seen him star in a sci-fi movie called Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, but that movie wasn't that good either. But I could see him coming back around. And as for Alex Russell, I think he's been in the SWAT TV show, but hasn't really popped up in any more big movies. Overall, good movie. Definitely recommend it. We'll definitely come back to this every couple years. And if you made it all the way to the end, as always, like and comment. That'll definitely help this little channel grow. Subscribe for more movie content, and I'll see you on the next one.